Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me today on this Saturday. Hopefully, you're having a good Saturday so far. I am feeling a little bit under the weather. You could probably tell in my voice, kind of a sore throat. So I might have to take a few pauses today to drink some water as we are going along, but we will get through it. So my video is doing something weird here. Let's make sure our chat is up. Say hello to everyone. Go ahead and say hi in the chat if you are here. Open the Q&A as well. Miriam, our wonderful TA, will be able to answer any questions that shows. And you can upvote the questions there as well. So if someone else asks a question and you really want to hear the answer for that too, please upvote it so that we know that you want to know more about that. And you don't even have to ask like a full question. If you can just say like, can you talk more about climate change or something like that? And then we'll know that is what is important for you and what you want to learn more about. So let's see. We're going to start today off here with a poll. So I'm going to go ahead and open that. And the polls do appear in the bottom, kind of right, not the bottom right. So the right hand side of your screen at the bottom of the chat. So if you go there at the bottom of the chat, you can go ahead and vote on our poll today that we're starting with. And our poll is, what is the greatest threat to the natural world? Is it plastics, climate change, loss of biodiversity, or chemical pollutants like DDT? So go ahead and take a vote on that as everyone is still coming in. I'm gonna go ahead and, share my screen here. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about global change. And this is my favorite unit because I feel like it's really, why we study environmental science. The rest of it's kind of like the science behind these things, like what is causing these and what, natural processes were occurring here before. But now we're going to really get into like the major impacts humans are having on the natural world and what that causes, like problems that causes for us in the long term, and really looking at like how we're changing things with just the way we live. I'm going to jump on into that. So we are split on our answers here. Let's go ahead and publish our results. And there's no right answer. This would be a great debate to talk about, like, what do we personally feel is the greatest impact or having like the greatest threat to the natural world? Is it climate change and all of the major impacts that's causing? Loss of biodiversity, massive loss of biodiversity going on right now. We're going to talk about that more. And then chemical pollutants like DDT. We're not going to talk too much about pollutants in this stream because we kind of focused on that for the last two streams. But I just had to say something too. You know how we talked about how we thought DDT was really safe and we sprayed it on everything. We put it on people. It was in like bug spray that you could put on your body and different things. And then we found out that it's actually an endocrine disruptor and it causes birth defects and it's actually really bad. I just happened to be watching the TV and I saw an advertisement for a gym saying that, we're keeping everything very sanitized, for the coronavirus. So please come in and start working out again. And they had this like handheld sort of machine thing that was just spraying some sort of like chemical, to sanitize the virus. So who knows what that was? Bleach, chlorine. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but all I could think about was, man, we used to like spray DDT like that all over the place. And then we found out that was actually a really bad toxin. So just interesting to think about, like, what are people spraying all over the place to sanitize for coronavirus, and then like, is that actually going to come back to be an issue as well? So always got to be thinking about that kind of stuff. So what chemicals are we using that we are trusting is safe right now that maybe aren't? Right, let's go ahead and hide this one now that I got you all paranoid. And let's jump in. As always, if you don't want your name to appear, just use a different name. And please join us on all of our social media platforms. Again, Fiveable is not just a study tool or a study community for you. It is someplace that you can continue supporting others, and you can look for internships and to become a TA, different things like that. So definitely stay with us after your AP exam. And this is what's coming up. This is our last content exam. So if nothing else, if you have been with us for all of CRAMs, and once we're done with today, that means you will have watched 9 hours of environmental science study tips and facts. So a good on you for that. That's hard just in itself. So then we are going to move on to free response tips and tricks and kind of break down exactly what we need to do with that information to succeed on this exam specifically. And our very last trivia is going to be tomorrow night. So please come and participate at that. That's 6 p.m. East Coast time. So you'll have to do the math to calculate when it is if you are in a different time zone. But please come join us for that. All right, this is what we are going to talk about today. We are going to jump in to kind of human impact and go over all of these different subjects: the ozone, climate change, ocean warming, ocean acidification, endangered species, and all of that. So let's get right into it because it is a lot today. All right, so stratospheric ozone depletion. And let's just start by breaking it down again. Remember when we learned about the different layers of the atmosphere, and we said just those 2 teeny ones on the bottom there are what's important really for this class. So this is where it's important to know the difference between the stratosphere and the troposphere, because when we talk about climate change and ozone depletion, they occur in completely different places. They are not like touching each other. They are completely different situations. So the stratosphere is higher up, right? We do not live in the stratosphere. Even an airplane flying as high as it can in the sky and you can barely see it, that is still in the troposphere. It's not in the stratosphere. So that just gives you kind of an idea of like how far away this is from us. And it's a good thing because ozone it can be a carcinogen, which means it can cause cancer, and breathing in ozone is really not good for you. Ozone is, one of the key components of smog, remember, when it's in the troposphere. So that's kind of where you need to have that differentiation, because tropospheric ozone, bad, stratospheric ozone, good, right? And that's, a human's interpretation of what is good and bad. But anyways, so stratospheric ozone is ozone that's really far away from us. And significant anthropogenic depletion of ozone was detected and reduced with intergovernmental cooperation. I tried to use some big words there on purpose because that is a beautiful sentence that you can use on an FRQ if it is talking about stratospheric ozone. So let's break down some of those words. Anthropogenic means human caused, so like made by humans. So there is natural, like ozone, there's natural ozone depletion. So this is talking about specifically human caused ozone depletion. That's what that means when you use that word, which would be a great word to use on your exam. So humans cause the depletion of the ozone layer, and then actually we're able to solve the problem for the most part. So we're going to talk about that. That QR code there is because this is a topic that people feel uncomfortable with. They feel like they don't know or are not prepared with. So it's just an additional video for you to watch after the stream if you still feel like you want more support on this subject. Okay, so breaking this down as simply as we can, and I'm kind of going to oversimplify it here, just so you can get the basis of what's going on. And I know it's easy to like look at this slide and instantly want to just zone out, like, man, there's a lot of chemistry going on there and like O's and dashes, and I don't get it. But it is very simple. So this is the ozone layer without human interference or damage. This is kind of like what is naturally going on. So let's look kind of at the left side here, kind of ignore that picture for a second, and break it down with chemistry again, like what these terms are. Remember, a molecule is a group of atoms bonded together. So O2 which is a oxygen molecule, or O3, which would be an ozone molecule. Those are molecules, right? Again, it's just oxygen, it's just O's bonded together. So an atom is a basic unit of an element, and that's just one by itself, right? So one oxygen atom is just one O. Two oxygen atoms together would then be a molecule of oxygen, and that's 2 with a dash in between. And then 3 together, sorry, the is capitalized, is O3 is 3. So 3 oxygen atoms all linked together. Now, this is an oversimplification. Obviously, there's polarity issues going on, and those oxygen atoms are going to be at different angles. But for our understanding here in environmental science, we don't really need to know that specifically. All you need to know is that those oxygens are constantly popping between 1, 2, and 3. And those little bonds, the little dashes in between them, are being broken apart by the UV radiation that's coming in from the sun. So UVC, UVB, and UVA, typically all of UVC is absorbed before it reaches the Earth, and the majority of UVB is absorbed before it reaches the Earth as well. And that's because it is being broken apart. As it hits those bonds, it is being absorbed, right? So think about it as if it's like constant little bubbles popping and reforming, right? So it's constantly going from like a 3 of them bonded together to the one gets like shot off the side, and then it goes and finds a little 2 going together, and then it bonds, and now it's a 3 again, and then there's a little single 1, and then a 2. So those little oxygens are constantly popping from 1 to 2 to 3, right? And as they do that, they are absorbing that energy coming in from the sun. So this is what's going on in the ozone layer. It is absorbing that energy coming in from the sun, and it is helping us, humans and animals and plants down here. We evolved with this process going on. So we are not prepared to deal with, the Earth without it. We are not prepared to deal with these strong UVB and UVC rays coming down and hitting our bodies when either that's like a human or an animal or a plant. Like, we are not adapted to that because the ozone layer was there protecting us as we sort of evolved to be what we are. So again, this is what it is naturally. This is what's going on all the time. And then how did humans mess it up? Well, we developed these really cool chemicals called chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs. And what it is it's a propellant. So in any can that you can push down on like a button and it comes flying out on its own, that is like a propellant. So we're not talking about like if you have like Windex and you're squeezing the handle to have it come out, that like you are manually making the propellant for that. So we're not talking about those. We're talking about like hairspray, spray paint, those kinds of things where it comes flying out. Whatever chemical product you want, be it paint or hairspray, it needs to be carried out by this other substance called chlorofluorocarbon. So it's mixed in together. CFCs are extremely unreactive. So like they're not going to give you cancer. You can breathe them in. They're not going to like bond to the metals in your house. They're awesome for this sort of project because they just like float away, right? So it'd be great for spray paint because the paint would then like stick to whatever you're trying to paint, and then these little CFCs just kind of like go away, right? Awesome. So we put them in everything. And we also realized like they're really good, like their thermal retention property is really high. So CFCs, again, thermal retention is something is able to hold on to heat. So these are able to hold on to a temperature for a really long time. So they'd be a really good like insulator as well. So we use them for a ton of things, like in refrigeration and again, spray paints. But what it took us a while to figure out is these CFCs, they don't react with anything. So they just are here and they are very slowly, it takes them a very long time going up in the air. And eventually they do make it up into the stratosphere. And when they are in the stratosphere, they do interact with something that is strong enough to break them apart. and that is the UVC and UVB rays that hit them. So when they get hit by those rays, they break apart. And then those chlorine atoms are free to bond with the little oxygens that are popping up there and breaking apart. Well, when the oxygen bonds with chlorine, it can't then go become O3 again, right? And it goes away. So that's an issue because now we don't have the natural layer that's constantly popping and protecting us and absorbing that UV radiation because the O's are being stolen by the chlorofluorocarbons that come up and interact in that area. So again, that is like the very simplest way of explaining what caused the depletion of the ozone layer. It is the CFCs are going up there and bonding with the O's and stealing them away so they can no longer make O3. And sorry, it's kind of a gross slide, but why does that affect us? Like, why does it matter? Well, now those rays can get down to us, so an increased amount. And still, UVC is not probably going to get down to us because it's going to be broken up by other chemicals in the air, other atoms in the air, but UVB can, UVA can. So that's why like your sunscreen and your sunglasses will say like protects against UVA and UVB rays. And that is to protect your skin from being damaged by those energy rays, and as well as your corneas in your eyes can get damaged, and that's why people get cataracts. And so it's literally just like scarring of your eye to the point where you can't see because it's so cloudy. The same idea as if you like scraped up your sunglasses really bad and then we're trying to like look out of them, you wouldn't be able to see because they're so scraped up. So, but that can happen to your like eyeball, which is really freaky. So that's why you always want to wear sunglasses when you're outside that are rated to say UVA and UVB protectants. Then some like cheaper sunglasses are not, and that's like actually even worse because it makes your eyes think that they're inside, and then you're just allowing those rays to come into your eye. So definitely make sure you have good sunglasses and you are always wearing sunscreen when you're outside to protect yourself from those rays and protect yourself from getting sunburnt because these do cause skin cancer and cataracts in humans and animals. All right, so moving on. This is a success story. So this is definitely something you don't really hear about, the ozone layer so much in the news anymore. And that's because something was done about it. So the Montreal Protocol, you will definitely have to know that name. And it happened in 1989, but it's not super important that you know the date for that. But anyways, the Montreal Protocol encourage the phasing out of damaging chemicals. And again, any of these like protocols or intergovernmental, meetings or ideas means that this is something that's going on between different nations. And it's more of like hey, we're all going to do the right thing here. The science says this. So yeah, it's going to be expensive maybe, or, inconvenient to phase out CFCs because they were working really well. But, we should all do the right thing and take care of, the planet and make it so that it's not damaging for our health anymore. And this was highly successful. Like almost every, and I'm going to say like industrialized country jumped on board here. So definitely some of the countries that are still in the process of industrializing still produce CFCs. It's not like that, you can't ban them. You can't tell countries like you can't do this. We just want to encourage that. And obviously like the only thing that you could do to try and encourage that if you really wanted to was maybe like say, okay, we're not going to buy spray paint that was made in country, X if it was made with CFCs. And so country X is then going to be influenced and say, oh, hey, well, these, large other countries are not going to buy our products if we use these chemicals. So we got to step it up as well. Anyways, it was highly successful. And you can see kind of on that graph there where we were going with the ozone and how it was depleting very quickly. And again, this is something that like we have to make the change and then wait, because like we said, it takes a long time. It could take like 50 years for the CFCs to reach the ozone layer. So, if you stop using them today, it's still going to get worse for the next 50 years, and then it will start getting better again. But we have noticed that the depletion is going down, and then it is recovering, which is awesome because it is able to recover. So if we just like stop damaging it, it'll come back. And we've seen that. So this has been highly successful. The picture here shows the Antarctic, and that's where the damage was the greatest. The chemicals are concentrated there, and they are the most potent in really cold areas. So that's where the ozone hole, I guess, was. But it's not like it was just damaged there. There was depletion everywhere, but there was a concentration of depletion over the Antarctic due to the colder temperatures there, and it concentrating in that area. So you might be thinking, well, we still have spray paint and we still have hairspray. How is that working? And that is because we switched to a different chemical called hydrofluorocarbons, and we use those. And adding the hydrogen to those makes them much more reactive, right? And so you'd think like that's kind of a weird thing, but we want it to break apart in the troposphere. We don't want it to get to the stratosphere. So now it does. Now these chemicals will break apart, before they get up to the stratosphere. But remember we talked about that thermal retention property? These still have that. And that thermal retention property is what we're going to talk about next here with climate change. All right, so now we're going to talk about the greenhouse effect. And so we are jumping into a different part of the atmosphere entirely. Remember, before we were talking about the stratosphere, really, really, really high up. Now we are going to talk about the troposphere. So again, anthropogenic introduction of greenhouse gases have caused the global average temperature to increase. So human introduction of a greenhouse gas has caused a global average temperature to go up. And let's look at greenhouse gases. So a greenhouse, the reason that they got this term, a greenhouse is a outdoor building that's usually made of glass or plastic that, because it's made of glass or plastic, allows heat energy from the sun to enter it. But light energy comes in, it's turned to heat energy inside of the house, and then it doesn't exit. So anyways, if you live in like a cold climate, you might have a greenhouse, which is like a clear building to grow plants in because it's warm. It's not going to freeze like it would be outside. Sorry for the pauses, just trying to drink some water because my throat kind of hurts. But anyway, so greenhouse gas is a gas that, does the same thing. It's like a clear structure or blanket around us that absorbs heat energy from the sun and holds it in. If there were no greenhouse gases, we would freeze to death. We wouldn't be able to live on this planet. We have to have them to hold heat in. Otherwise, it would be like, extremely cold at night. And we would die. We wouldn't be able to live here. So we need them for sure. But drastically increasing their concentration increases the average temperature, of the Earth. And we've seen that. So here, let's take it back a second here and look at what are the greenhouse gases. Let's see in the chat, if you can throw it in there. What is the gas that is in the highest concentration in the atmosphere? Let me ask that better. What gas is there the most of in the troposphere, like in the atmosphere that we are in right now? Let's see if anyone can guess that. And then these other gases are here, but they're mostly trace gases. So like their concentration overall is small in comparison. But there's carbon dioxide, methane, water vapor, nitrous oxide, and those chlorofluorocarbons. Someone guessed it, nitrogen. Definitely nitrogen is the number one gas, like the largest concentration. I don't want to be wrong here. I think it's somewhere around like 78%. No, it's in the 70s. So very high concentration of nitrogen, and then oxygen as well. And then these other trace gases. So we're talking about like smaller percentages here. So it is easy to increase their percentage without, it's not like you have to change it to more than 70%. These are small amounts of chemicals here that then we are increasing slight bits, and it has a drastic impact. Okay, so where do they come from? Carbon dioxide is from burning of fossil fuels. For energy is 94% of carbon dioxide use. And then methane, livestock, and landfills. Livestock is like one of the largest impacts. If you think about how many cows are on the planet and how cows' stomach works, creates a lot of nitrogen, which is just cow farts. And that nitrogen, and we're talking, there are so many cows on the planet. I want to say, and again, I don't want to say like a wrong stat to you, but I want to say there are more cows. Maybe it's more all of livestock, so like cows, pigs, and chickens, than like wild animals altogether, which is insane. Anyways, water vapor naturally occurring in the atmosphere too. And so that like depends on where you are, right? Like, is it cloudy? Is it foggy? Is it like a rainstorm? Is it really dry where you are because you live in Arizona? So, is it really humid because you're in Florida? So the water vapor amount varies a lot depending on where you live. Nitrous oxide is another greenhouse gas that comes from agriculture or fossil fuel combustion. Remember, we talked about either the burning of gas or the burning of coal produces that. And then chlorofluorocarbons, those are, like we just talked about, propellants. So a propellant is like the thing in the spray can, or a coolant, which would be, I totally spelled that wrong. A coolant would be like in your refrigerator. Okay, so moving along here on this chart, GWP is going to be your global warming potential. And this is all based on carbon dioxide. So we looked at like, what does carbon dioxide do as far as its thermal retention? And then in comparison, what are the other ones? And so it just gives us like a baseline to see like how dangerous these other chemicals are in comparison. It gives us like a number to mathematically look at these things. And again, let's like talk about thermal retention again. So this would be like the idea, like, would you put your coffee, like super hot coffee, in a coffee mug or in a glass cup and then pick it up, right? Because your coffee mug is going to be like a bigger insulator and not burn your hands, whereas your glass cup is going to burn your hands. Same idea with the pool example, right? If it's 110 out, super hot, sunny day, that cement around the pool is going to burn your feet, but the water is going to be nice and cool. And that's because these different substances have different abilities to hold onto their original temperature or to absorb the temperature of something else, right? And that's thermal retention property. So these different chemicals have a different ability to hold on to a temperature and to keep that, I guess, the different potential to warm up our planet. So CO2, where carbon dioxide, we're just going to give that a number of 1 because we're going to compare everything else to it. So the global warming potential of methane is 25 times more than carbon dioxide. So 1 molecule of methane is like 25 carbon dioxides, right? And then let's move to nitrous oxide is like 300. So 1 molecule of nitrous oxide is like 300 carbon dioxide. And then chlorofluorocarbons, this has like a wide range on it. But let's go to the highest one there. So 1 chlorofluorocarbon is like 13,000 carbon dioxide molecules. So what makes more sense? Should we be going after carbon dioxide and saying drive your car less? Or should we be saying we need less cows, right? How many cows have the same impact as driving your car to work every day? So it's definitely something we need to look at. It's not a simple problem when we're talking about greenhouse gases. It's not just like a simple thing like, oh, let's just stop driving cars as much. Well, that might not do anything. If we're all still eating cheeseburgers every night and there are billions of cows on the planet, maybe it makes more sense to drive our cars and stop eating meat. I don't know. So that's what that last column there is, the concentration. So there's kind of like a twofold impact here. How strong is it? And then how big of an impact does it have? So there's obviously way more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere than methane, and then again, way more than chlorofluorocarbons. But, you'd have to reduce so much more carbon dioxide than chlorofluorocarbons to have the same impact. So, which one should we go after? And so it's kind of a complicated process and a complicated idea in order to reduce greenhouse gases. Okay, so increases in greenhouse gases, like how is this happening? And, what are the percentages of this as we move through time here? Human actions and industrialization have caused an increase in the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So there's my picture of cars. This chart shows us, it shows us two things. It shows us increasing over time, and it shows us like what percentage is there more of. So you can see carbon dioxide is, again, the huge heavy hitter. There is way more carbon dioxide increase than other things, but there's still a ton of methane there. There's CFCs, nitrous oxides. So, and if you look at this chart, typically when we talk about climate change, we're talking about how it's gone up since the Industrial Revolution, 100, 150 years ago. But this chart is showing this is 1990, right? That's not that long ago. And it's gone up in this report 45%. So it's not something that like started happening or is decreasing as far as like a long-term scale. This is like happening right now and drastically increasing. And again, we can kind of go back to looking at our industrialization and like our human population change ideas. And, you might not think you personally have increased your use of these things, and you may not have, because a lot of us are watching this from the US, and we are in a country that was industrialized a while ago. So we are not personally increasing, from what we used yesterday necessarily. However, there are more of us, right? So more of us are using it at that rate. But other countries are becoming more industrialized. So again, we talked about there are billions of people on the planet who don't have access to a car or a large house or a dryer or these things that are getting access to those things, which is great for them because it is improving their quality of life, and everyone should have access to the same things that make us happy. But as that happens, more people are using more energy and causing more of these chemicals to be produced. More people want to be able to eat cheeseburgers every night, which is great. We should all be able to do that. If one of us can do it, it's not right to say someone else can't. But then we need to have billions and billions, like 10 billion cows on the planet to support us all doing that. So it kind of goes to, start thinking about change, and the planet is just not big enough for us all to live in the way that like people in industrial countries are living right now. So we are all going to have to make a change because it's just not fair to say that other people can't do the same things that we enjoy doing. All right, so what's going to happen if the climate changes? And we're talking about a very significant, like a very insignificant, I guess, amount. We're not talking about, it's going to go up 50 degrees average. It's going to be like so hot, we're melting. But 1 degree is all that matters when we're talking about ice, right? Ice is either frozen or not frozen on 1 degree, right? So 32 degrees Fahrenheit would be frozen. And then if it's above that, it's going to melt. And if we melt the ice on our planet, then that is going to cause these significant changes. So really, we're just talking about like 1 degree average is going to cause like a massive change. And so I just listed them all out here for consequences, and definitely because that's kind of as you would see it on the exam might say like, what is a consequence of anthropogenic climate change? And so you're going to be able to say like, what is a consequence, and like, how does that affect humans? And so these are some different ideas that you could say. So rising sea levels is one, flooding and loss of communities and habitats from rising sea levels. Again, and a massive amount of water is stored in the ice caps. And if we melt that, then the ocean level is going to go up significantly. Melting of permafrost. So again, the permafrost, think about the tundra here. We learned about our different biomes. There is like, think about like frozen mud. There's like a massive amount of frozen mud up there that different plants have been falling into, and instead of decomposing, they're just like sitting there frozen, right? So like imagine if your like entire freezer, all of a sudden you unplugged it, everything in there is going to get hot and gross and decompose, right? And with that decomposition, you are going to have all of that CO2 and methane be released. So if we allow the tundra to melt, massive amounts of methane are going to be released. And again, this is where you want to see that positive feedback loop or be able to reference that. As the permafrost melts, methane is released, causing a positive feedback loop, meaning that it's going to then melt more permafrost and release more methane, and it's going to cause this like crazy domino effect that we cannot stop once it starts. Same thing for the melting of sea ice. So if we lose sea ice, white color is reflective. So sea ice reflects heat. If we lose the sea ice, then we're going to have land, which is like brown, or water, which absorb much more heat. And again, it's going to cause the warming to go much more quickly. As we change, so kind of these are a little bit backwards, I guess, in thought process. As we melt the sea ice, you're going to have a ton of new water in the ocean, and different temperature waters, and that is going to cause the currents of the ocean to shift. As those currents are shifting, that causes weather patterns on land to shift. And again, that's where you're going to get those atypical or not normal weather patterns. So massive hurricanes like Hurricane Katrina, you're going to have droughts going on and fires, different things like that. So large, very extreme weather events are going to happen that we are not more used to from before. And it's all just going to be kind of like a domino effect from these things happening. All right, so moving right along here, I want to make sure we get to everything in time. Ocean warming, and like, why is that an issue and who is that going to affect? So greenhouse gases and the increasing global temperatures also cause the ocean surface to increase in temperature. Why that's an issue is because it causes a loss of habitat for sensitive animals. And remember, like everything, pretty much everything, well, like fish and things like that, living in the ocean, it's harder for them to regulate their temperature because they are in water. All right, so they are affected more heavily by those temperature changes. They typically cannot live, in huge swings of temperature. It causes reproduction issues, and that's why we had our picture of our turtle out there. Turtles are dependent on an exact temperature for their eggs to hatch and to become male or female. So a lot of reptiles actually depend on the temperature of their nests to determine the gender of their babies, which is really cool. But if it's really hot, you're going to have all females and you're not going to have any male turtles, and that will lead to extinction. In addition, other animals in the ocean, can't reproduce if it's not the right temperature. And then finally, one of the biggest, like kind of most famous issues with changing temperature in the ocean, again, and these are for creatures that can't move. So coral cannot move. It's stationary, sedentary, and benthic are all terms that can be used for that. Benthic means living on the bottom of the ocean, and sedentary means it cannot move. And so it can't get away. If it gets too hot, coral is a symbiotic animal, and it lives with algae in its skin. So the reason they're so colorful is because they have algae in their skin, and those algae, photosynthesize and provide energy to the coral. It provides sugars, and the coral then, provide a structure for those algae to live. So when it gets too hot, the algae die, and coral cannot survive without those algae. And so they will die. So they bleach. Bleaching is the loss of algae, right? So the bright white corals like that, it's bleached, it's lost its algae. it can come back. So some of them are able to regain algae population within their skin, or within their flesh, I guess it should be called, and they are able to come back. But for the vast majority, they're not. And so there have been mass bleaching events, which are times when it's like really, really hot, and it's caused the ocean to heat up significantly. So like weather events that cause the ocean to heat up cause mass bleaching events, and some of them are so bad that it's like 90% of the coral reefs in the Great Barrier Reef had at least some of the coral bleach, right? And some of them are like 50% of the coral in each individual area was lost and died. And coral grows so slowly, so it takes forever for them to come back. When they die, all of the fish and other animals that are reliant on them die as well. The entire reef dies. So this is like a huge issue. It's not like coral can just like, oh, it's too hot here, let me move, more south or more north to a different environment. Maybe over time, some of their babies can settle there, but this species grows so slowly that it's extremely vulnerable to extinction from climate change. So again, the bright white coral has been bleached, but it's not dead yet. When it does die, it typically gets covered with some like slime and starts to decompose as the tissue of that animal decays. And then it would just be like a bleached, it almost looks like a stone of that calcium that's left behind, and it would turn into sand as it breaks apart. All right. And then staying on the ocean, what is ocean acidification, and how's that different? What does it cause to ocean animals? So the first one is we're literally just talking about temperature. This one, we're going to talk about how the acid level of the ocean is increased. So ocean water absorbs CO2, and that causes the pH level to drop. The fact that the ocean can absorb CO2 is huge. This is what could possibly reverse climate change. The oceans could save us. But if it's absorbing too much too quickly, it is going to decrease increase the acidity level by decreasing the pH. So I know you see this chemical equation here and you are initially thinking panic. This is too complicated. I just put that up there for you to see an example. You don't have to memorize that. I cannot imagine that they would ask you to actually put the chemical equation on the test. I mean, it's possible, but if it's really intimidating for you, I would focus your energy more on understanding the concept that's going on here. So in general, what's going on in our equation there, let's kind of run through it, is you are having more CO2 in the atmosphere. That CO2 enters the water and bonds with oxygen. And if we kind of look at the end of the equation here, those increased hydrogen ions, so the H pluses, that is what is going to cause our pH to decrease and become more acidic. And I know the pH thing is always, it's a lower number means higher acid. And so it kind of feels backwards to say that. But in general, CO2 going into the ocean and bonding with water is going to cause the release of those hydrogen ions. And those hydrogen ions, having more and more of those in the water, is what is going to drop the pH and make the ocean more acidic. And we're not talking about it's going to burn you when you go in. Ocean water is naturally a little bit basic. So let's say it's a pH of around 8, and we're going to be pulling it down, making it a little bit more acidic. But we're definitely not talking a pH of 2 or something that's crazy. So why does this matter? A lot of ocean creatures make their bodies with calcium, so the calcification of their bodies. So that's going to be coral, different algae, shellfish, and then that crazy word right there, pteropods. It has a silent P at the start. Pteropods, that's a picture of one. They are microscopic little snails, you can think of them as, and they have these little wings on them because they can sort of fly around in the water. They are a huge basis of the food chain. So there are millions of these little guys in the ocean. and filter feeders eat them. And so you're going to have like anchovies and stuff eating these guys, and then anchovies feed larger fish and then larger fish and larger fish. So if these pteropods went extinct, you would have like a massive chain effect of other organisms not having a food source anymore. So again, this acidification of the ocean is really detrimental to all of these little creatures that have calcification in their bodies. So it's going to be like clams and stuff. They're not going to be able to build their body because of the acid is going to be dissolving them and making them very weak. So yeah, hopefully that kind of simplified ocean acidification. I feel like it sounds like a scary thing, but it's really not. And you might need to be able to write down that equation on the test, but I honestly think as long as you can say that CO2 bonding with oxygen in the ocean is going to increase the available hydrogen ions, and then as a result decrease the pH, like that I think is a pretty solid explanation of the chemicals or chemistry of what's going on. And then that in turn causes the, erosion of organisms that have calcification of their bodies, and that destroys the natural food chains or the basis of a food chain. That is a pretty good explanation of ocean acidification and its impacts. All right, so moving right along here, invasive species. Human movement and globalization of trade and travel have led to species moving from their native habitat to a new location and competing with native species. So we have our little kitty there, which is a prime example of an invasive species that is just decimating native species. Cats hunt for fun, and they love to kill little squirrels and animals and birds that are native. So here are some example. Typically, invasive species are going to be generalists and are selected. Remember what that means, that they reproduce very quickly. They have tons of babies, very little parental care, and they are able to outcompete native populations. Generalists eat anything. They can handle a lot of temperatures in different environments. So how do we stop this? Regulatory laws help prevent the introduction of species. So like that's our zebra mussels there. That's a huge example. So a lot of times if you move your boat from one lake to another, you have to have it inspected for zebra mussels and have the bottom of the boat scraped to make sure you're not going to introduce them into a new lake. Making sure people don't bring in exotic animals, and regulating what people can have as pets is one way. And then once they do get out into the environment, it is extremely difficult to catch them and remediate their population growth. So that's a picture of a cane toad in the middle. Cane toads in Australia, Hawaii, the Pacific Islands have just taken over. They are a massive poisonous toad. They are very large. They eat like everything, and they are not eaten by pretty much anything because they are very poisonous. They have like poison glands right behind their eyes there. And then that last picture is of Japanese stilt grass. That is, I'm sure you've seen it if you live on like the East Coast of the US. It is a very invasive grass. I believe it came to the US because it was used as a packing, like a way to pack like valuable dishes in China that was shipped here. And then like the packaging was still alive, I guess, and got out. And now it is a extremely invasive plant. So it doesn't have to, it can be like aquatic, it can be plants, it can be animals, it can be predators. So a lot of different things can be an invasive species, and they outcompete the native species. All right, moving right along here to talk about endangered species. Human behaviors have caused organisms to drop in numbers by decreasing habitat, hunting, or outcompeting them. And that QR code there is going to take you to the website for IUCN Red List, and you should absolutely go look at that website if you are unfamiliar with it, if you haven't seen it yet. It's really interesting. You can literally look up like every species. They want to do every species, like or like every major species. And this, we're talking about plants, bugs, birds, lions, everything. And they do an evaluation on them. So they study their numbers, they study like what kind of ecosystem do they need, what impacts are happening to them right now, like are they being hunted, is their forest being burned down, and then based on that they give them a rating. And so these are the ratings that they use. On the left there is like the most extreme, like extinct being completely gone from the planet, extinct in the wild, meaning it only exists in captivity, critical, endangered, vulnerable, and then near threatened and least concern. So they are able to kind of like classify each individual animal, and then we can make smart decisions about how to save them, and like what ecosystems need to be protected. So again, that website is really cool because you can look by like region, like what are animals in the Arctic facing, or you can like look up lions, you can look up, and it'll tell you like the specific problems for each of those species. So really cool website. I highly recommend that you like play around on it a little bit. It's a really neat resource that like we're generating as people. So it's really cool. All right, so impacts on biodiversity. Human impacts on species has caused both the total number of species and the total wild organisms on the planet to drop substantially. So it's considered at this point a mass extinction event. So many species are dropping in their numbers and are absolute, like so many are just going extinct altogether, that it's a mass extinction event. So similar to like the loss of the dinosaurs. It's insane. So many species are endangered or threatened. And these pictures here on the bottom are kind of like the why. So that first picture on the left there, those are like the American bison. Those are their skulls, so their heads. Isn't that absolutely insane that that's how many bison used to be in the US, free roaming around, and that were killed by humans? And at one time to pile up all of their skulls like that, and those people are proud of it. They're standing on them like proud of what they did. And people used to like literally ride on trains and shoot them just for the case of like we don't want the buffalo to go in front of a train and like possibly derail the train or slow it down. So let's just kill them so that they're not in the way. And these used to be arguably one of the most abundant large animals on the planet, and then they brought them down to the point of near extinction. They're almost completely gone. It's just insanity. And so if you look all the way over to the picture on the right, that is an aerial picture, a picture taken from a plane of farmland. The entirety of like the interior of the US used to be plains. So it used to just be grasslands filled with buffalo and pronghorns and deer and all these different animals. And now, even if we wanted to re-release them, there's nowhere for them to go. It's all farmland. The majority, it's like a crazy number. It's like 90% of all of the initial grasslands are now turned into either houses or farms, or they're not accessible anymore. So other than like parks like Yellowstone National Park, there's nowhere, you can't even like bring these animals back because there's nowhere to put them. Their habitat is completely gone. And that's just one example. So if you look at the earth as a whole, we've completely decimated where animals are supposed to live by building cities or farms or different things. So that abbreviation there, HIPPCO, if you can memorize that and memorize the associated things with it, that will help you remember human impacts on biodiversity. So habitat destruction, invasive species, population growth, pollution, climate change, and overexploitation. Overexploitation, that would be like our picture there of the shark fins. Those have been, sharks are hunted, their fins are removed, and the shark is thrown back into the water to make shark fin soup. That's absolutely crazy. That would be like hunting tigers to cut their tail off, and then to make soup out of just the tail. Like, it's a top predator. Typically, they reproduce very slowly. And yeah, so it has decimated shark populations. All right, so I want to have you guys encourage you to ask any questions that you have in the chat now. Remember, as always, you're going to be able to join Discord after this to ask our TA Miriam any questions that come up. But I just wanted to pose that to see if you guys had anything for me. And while we take a second for you guys to think of any questions, I wanted to put this up as well. So I know that this unit is, and environmental sciences, of course, overall can sometimes be a little overwhelming, right? Like, it just feels like we're destroying the earth and there's nothing that we can do about it. And, you know, you're like, I don't hunt sharks and, you know, I don't go out and cut down trees and, you know, like, what can I personally do? So my advice to you is to take a deep breath and that everything will be okay and we will figure this out. And any impact that you can make as a person individually is huge. And, you know, you think that maybe it doesn't matter if you bring reusable bags to the grocery store because the 10 people in front of you all got 100 plastic bags, but it does matter. So any little thing that you can do to make a difference, if we all do something, it'll make a big difference, you know. And obviously the better thing would be is if our government can support us, and just banning plastic bags would be super. But if that's not going to happen, if everyone just makes like a tiny change, that will make a big impact overall. So again, try not to absorb too much of this negativity, and focus on the little things that you can do to make a difference. And then I wanted to show you these documentaries to talk about continuing your learning about these subjects. These subjects are all so big and so all-encompassing that it's hard to just teach it, you know, in an hour, talking as fast as I can like that. So these are documentaries that I really encourage you to watch. But again, it might make you feel a little bit overwhelmed and a little bit sad. So you can, you know, watch them and then go do something fun, take your mind off it and think about positivity and what you can do. You know, what actions, tangible actions that you can do to make a difference. A lot of these are on Netflix, not all of them. Shark Water is one of my favorite all-time documentaries. It is the start of like the Sea Shepherd, which is, you know, the big boat that's down in the Antarctic preventing whaling. So that's one of my all-time documentaries, but it might be hard for you to find that one. Seaspiracy and Cowspiracy are a little bit, anytime you watch a documentary, you have to remember that it was made by a person who has feelings and wants things to be kind of done in their way. Sorry, my daughter just came up here to say hi. So again, you have to be very careful with what you're watching to make sure that it sorry about that, guys. She wanted to come hang out. Okay, sorry about that. I have a 2-year-old and she wanted to come join and say hi, but she went back downstairs. Anyways, anytime you're watching a documentary, you have to think about who made it and what they wanted you to see. And not that any of those facts are going to be wrong. Just that they're only showing you what they want you to see, right? So if you're going to watch anything, just kind of thinking, you have to be thinking about it as they're telling you. The David Attenborough one is really good. I highly recommend that one. Same thing with Chasing Coral, Plastic Ocean. Rotten is a series about like where our food comes from. And I promise it's not going to make you be like grossed out. But it's just going to make you think about like, where does your food come from and like who made sacrifices in order to get it there for you. Thanks, guys. I will tell her you said hi. I know it's tough for her. She wants to play with mommy. So I will promise I'll take her to the park after this to make up for it. And then, so Rotten's good. I promise it's not going to be like gross you out and make you not want to like, eat meat or something like that. It's just like interesting, like where does honey come from? And, you know, what are the environmental impacts from producing honey? And then that last one, Trophy, I do recommend you watch that one. But again, I'm going to give you like a big, same thing with, I think it's in Cowspiracy, there is like a slaughtering of an animal. So if you are like sensitive to seeing that, and it would make you sad, definitely don't watch those, or be prepared that there is going to be like blood or an animal dying in those videos. But trophy is very interesting. It's about the idea of hunting animals being a way to save them. So like if you sell, okay, we're going to have a guy come and he's going to shoot one lion, but he's going to pay us $500,000 to do it. How many lions could we save with that amount of money by preserving habitat, right? So like a very interesting look into weighing the pros and cons of using hunting in order to preserve natural spaces. So again, very interesting, but all of those watch with like your brains on. And if you are feeling overwhelmed or a little sad, definitely take a step back. Those other short videos are really interesting look at desertification. And how the other one is how wolves changed Yellowstone. So how the reintroduction of Yellowstone actually changed like rivers. So rivers took different courses after the wolves came in, and why. It's a really interesting look at the chain reaction of organisms, and how that, changing one keystone species like that has a massive impact on the environment. All right, guys. I think we are all done here. Please take a look at those. Again, join us on Discord so we can discuss any questions that you may have had as we were going. I did have one more poll for us. I can put it up really quick here. I know we're a little bit over at this point. My last question for you, just because I feel like Unit 9 is a little bit, sometimes it makes us feel sad. But in what way do you think you could reduce your impact as an individual? Try to be, instead of overwhelmed or sad by the content, be inspired. What can you do? And just make a change on your own. So I'm going to say reduce meat consumption, reduce CO2, and reduce single-use plastics. Me personally, I really hit the single-use plastics ones hard. So I bring my reusable bags, and I, try my very best to not get straws. I'd never use plastic water bottles. So things like that. I've already done that one. So I think for me in the future, for CO2, like I work from home, I don't even really drive. I don't really drive anywhere. I'm going to focus on the meat one. I feel like that's a big deal, and something that I've kind of just been ignoring in my personal life. So I'm going to try to do that one moving forward. I'm going to try to see if I can possibly pull the amount of meat out of what I eat a little bit, and see if we can make more plant-based food without just eating salads. So that's my goal for myself moving forward. So again, I'm going to publish our results, see if there are things, and a lot of you are probably not driving yet, so reducing your CO2 would be difficult. So definitely see if you can reduce meat consumption, or reduce single-use plastics. Okay, guys, thank you again for joining me today, and let us know if there's any other way that we can support you or answer any of your questions. All right, guys.